Hi, everybody. I'm Karina Stark. I'm just going to go over a couple housekeeping items, and then I'm going to pass the mic to Elaine. First off, thank you all so much for joining. We're really excited to present a little bit more about this project and hopefully get a bunch more people involved in it. This is being recorded. You'll notice that your mics are off right now. If you have questions, we're going to try to get through the presentation first and then go through questions in whatever time we have remaining. So please, if a question comes up, please put it into the chat. We'll be going through it afterwards. And if we don't answer all the questions, we will be making sure to try to follow up with folks with answers or at least a plan to get to an answer. And with that, Elaine, do you want to take us away?
Thanks, Karina. I'm Elaine O'Neill, who, along with my colleague Maureen Pootman, are the managing directors for Quorum, which stands for the Consortium for Research on Renewable Industrial Materials. Consortium members are in 20 research institutions across the US and Canada, and we've spent about the last 28 years understanding the environmental performance of wood products, including how they fit into the circular economy. I'm very big on that. Well, our predominant focus has been on solid wood, and including the carbon footprint of it. We've also delved into biofuels and other co-products, including energy products like biochar. And that's where we met Kelpie Wilson of Wilson Biochar quite a few years ago. Kelpie was one of the co-founders of the US Biochar Initiative and has since branched off into another endeavor, Biochar on Site, which she's dragged Karina into. Kelpie is the engineer behind the Ring of Fire kilns and recently published the Biochar Handbook. A little plug there for her handbook. It's fabulous. She brings a world of biochar wisdom to this project. We're very grateful for her. And she's also built a partnership with a guy named Vihan Becker. He's the main architect of the Char app, and he's an extraordinary industrial mind. With that, I'll pass it to Karina for introduction.
Thanks, Elaine. So I'm Karina Stark, and I got into this because I am a small forest landowner and a circular economy consultant. So kind of coming at it from both of those angles. And as Elaine alluded to, I'm also working with Kelpie as program director for Biochar on Site, and I'm the primary investigator for this project. So let's tell you guys a little bit about how this project came to be. Our focus for this project is on Washington State, but not just all of Washington State, a particular part of Washington State. And as you can see here, there's a broad variety of ecosystems here. This is a just average annual rainfall. It goes from, over 180 inches a year to less than 10. So there's a lot of things going on. We are going to be focusing this grant effort on the most fire risk areas over here, just east of the Cascades in the central and north central areas of the state. That area is very fire prone. This is a map put together by the wonderful fire folks at the University of Washington. And it shows that even over the last 25 years, there's multiple areas that have burned multiple times. And that's just in recent history. So fire isn't a case of if, but when and how often and at what severity. The other challenge that a lot of the folks that we're focusing on in this central and north central area is money. This is just looking at the average, not the median, but the average income in these counties. And this is 2022 data. And so you can see that the areas that we're trying to serve here, their average income is between $40,000 and $50,000 versus over in the area of the I-5 corridor, Seattle, et cetera, where it's between 60 and 120-ish. So the folks that we're trying to help just don't typically have access to the capital they need to manage their forest land and make sure that the fires that come through are not these high severity fires. Now, when folks are doing management on their plans, what you're seeing here are a bunch of burn piles going. When people remove excess biomass from their forest land, and for the folks here on the call who do have forest land, this is all, you know, very well known to you. If you're trying to make sure that there's more space between your trees and you're reducing the fire risk and you're reducing fuel loads, you have to do something with all the material that you're pulling out. There's multiple options available, but most of the time, what most people do is create burn piles. And one of the things that I've certainly seen, this is a photograph of a property that I spend a lot of time on in Eastern Washington. You can see down in here, actually, this is going to highlight it. These are scars. These are burn scars from some of these large burn piles that burn at fairly high intensity, like a high intensity wildfire, and things just don't grow there for a while. And that's part of what got me into biochar, was figuring out, okay, how do I not only, as a small forest landowner, not only do things that are going to not have as much smoke, not have as much of an escape, especially in this wildfire prone area, but also be better for the soil. So Elaine, do you want to take us through some of the history of using biochar in Washington State?
So we're going to start with saying we know that there's other tools in the toolbox to manage fire risk. There's various biochar production technologies that can manage these forest residues in place, and which also reduces fire risk and creates a stable carbon product, is biochar, which when you put it back on the site, it helps the soils retain moisture, which matters in really dry sites, and also nutrients. And there's some complexity around that nutrient story. It's something Rocky Mountain Research Station has been looking at for the past 25 years or so. Unfortunately, in Washington, the state regulations either outright banned the use of some of these technologies, or made the regulations were so onerous that just couldn't even touch it. So we needed to work with legislators to actually change the law to allow the use of some of these technologies. A coalition made up of small forest landowners, tribes, conservation organizations, and others worked to that end in 2024 in a 60-day short session. Next slide, please. Part of that effort was to produce educational materials to help lawmakers understand the differences between purpose-built technologies like the Kelpie's Wilson's Ring of Fire kiln and burn barrels, because burn barrels are outlawed in this state, in Washington State. Without going into the gory details of fire physics, because we'd have to bring Kelpie in, sufficient to say that the flame cap kiln burns residues with less smoke than regular open burning or a burn barrel. And that's a plus for air quality. We have, air sheds here that have some significant air quality issues. And the other thing is it can easily be managed so we can put out the fire to save the biochar instead of letting it turn to ash. Next slide, please. I'll tell you, what we learned is democracy is not a spectator sport. And it took a gigantic effort from a large coalition of folks to get that overarching law changed to allow biochar production using flame cap kilns, which is the dominant tool we're going to use for this project. We had to leave the use of the larger air curtain burners on the cutting room floor, come back and take another run at that later. So this is just a picture of a few of the coalition members here. We're pretty happy. We're pretty relieved. We're pretty tired. But we were there when the governor signed into law the bill that allowed the use of the flame cap kilns to process clean biomass. Next slide, please. So Karina, she'd been instrumental. She was calling and talking to a bazillion legislators, trying to educate them on this. She'd been very instrumental in the coalition. So the first thing she does is she goes back to her local conservation district forester and says, hey, let's put on a demo. So here they are doing the flame cap kiln burn demo. And she said, well, I'm going to invite the neighbors and I'm going to invite the local fire chief and see what they have to say. And that helped foment the great idea that ultimately led to this project. So Brina, share some observations there and take it away.
Yeah, one of the things that was really wonderful about doing this, and granted, we were doing this within a month of the ink getting dry on the governor's signature, was seeing how it really mattered to work with local groups. So the local conservation district, local foresters, local folks who are working on ecological restoration, and bringing the local fire professionals in as well. So we had somebody from the local station come up, and while this was going on, as you can see, there's almost no smoke. There's a little puff right here. And one of the things that we saw in talking to the fire chief was, sorry, not fire chief, the fire professional from the local station was, I said, hey, look, there's almost no smoke. What do you think about this? He says, well, that's really cool, but there's two other things that I think are even cooler. One is that there's almost no embers coming out, and embers are what travel to set fires elsewhere. The second thing is that, and we've got we were using a heat gun to take the temperature readings, is that the heat inside the kiln was really, really high. So it meant that things were combusting completely. Because one of the challenges a lot of folks have with the burn piles is that it's incomplete combustion. They need to light and relight and relight. And these kilns are very hungry. They're able to process about 5x their volume, give or take, in a particular session. So, and then of course it's contained, so you reduce the fire risk of the actual session itself, blowing out and into other local biomass. So this part of it and working with the local fire officials is really, really key, and really, really demonstrated how working with these local groups has been helpful. It also meant that in successive demonstrations that we've done since then, there's more and more folks involved. More people are wanting to host, more organizations are trying to host. And it's exactly this kind of organic, community-led practice that we're hoping to spread even more through this grant. And so what we've seen is that, yes, over the last literally calendar year, we've seen biochar as an option that is actually viable in Washington, which we're very excited about. And so a couple things that have been happening at the same time. Again, we're still part of like, how did this grant come to be, or how did this grant award come to be? There was a lot of discussion about small forest landowners. And actually, Elaine, do you want to sort of take this a little bit about how small forest landowners don't typically have access to these kinds of markets?
Yeah, that sort of takes me down a little bit of a rabbit hole. In Washington State in 2021, there was something called the Climate Commitment Act. And in that, it's a giant act, I don't know, 2,500 pages or something. And there was one tiny little paragraph section that said, small forest landowners have difficulty accessing carbon credit markets, and therefore we are going to offer, an opportunity to convene a work group for small forest landowners to figure out how to get what needs to happen or what needs to change to make that possible. And I ended up convening that group in some other work that I do with small forest landowners in the state with the Washington Farm Forestry Association. And so what we figured out is you need to figure out aggregation in a really big way. And you also need to think about sort of long-term benefits and how do you mesh all these pieces together. And so we came up with a number of recommendations there. And one of the things that I think is probably low-hanging fruit, and we're in conversation with other folks across the country on this, is how to tie things like fire resilience back to these markets. Can we get additional funding and provide sort of long-term durable carbon that the market wants, while funding things that we want, which is forest health and fire resilience without breaking the bank.
Thanks, Elaine. So, Elaine mentioned aggregation as really the only viable way for us to really support small forest landowners and actually accomplishing some of these funding goals. And the good news is that also last year, a new protocol came out from the Climate Action Reserve. So the Climate Action Reserve is one of multiple organizations such as PURO, Vera, etc., who have protocols for people who want to put together projects that would then be, have the opportunity to have carbon credits that can be sold on the market. In this particular protocol, the US-Canada Biochar protocol, you can go to Climate Action Reserve and read up all about it. It enabled that aggregation. And here's why that was really important. This is a lot of big dots on here, but generally speaking, and this is a huge simplification, for a lot of biochar projects, what will typically happen is that biomass is sourced from multiple locations. And that biomass is then transported to a central location where the biochar is produced. The biomass is converted into biochar. And then biochar is sold to multiple folks that may be doing multiple different multiple applications with it, whether they're putting it into concrete or using it as a soil amendment or combining it with compost and making sort of a fertilizer type of situation. And only once the biochar is actually utilized and has an end use, or is it eligible then for the carbon credits to be awarded and then sold? And along the way, you can see that biomass is being moved around and that biochar is being moved around. And so you've got a lot of parties in play, and you've also got a lot of literal moving parts. The other thing is that it typically requires that biochar to be sold to folks before it can be utilized. Now that's, again, generally speaking, it has a lot of these components in it. And so given the context that you just heard about from Elaine with all of these small forest landowners, and now we have this new tool that allows for easy, low cost, accessible, mobile, site-specific biochar production, we thought, well, what if there's a way to do this that's even simpler? And now you're going to see something that has way fewer dots in it. What if for each site, the biochar production, the biomass that goes into that production, and the utilization of the biochar from that production were all used on one site? So for a small forest landowner, they already have the biomass there. We make the biochar on site, and we use that biochar right there on their property. You don't have to sell the biochar. That goes out of the question. You don't have to move the biomass around. It's already there. You don't have to move the biochar around. It's already there. And so then the part that scales are the number of sites in which you're doing it. And by aggregating all of them, that's what goes to the carbon credit sales. So as you can see, this is way fewer dots than the prior slide. Now, granted, this is being replicated over multiple sites, but that's a big part of what we're trying to do here. A key part of this, though, is making sure we can measure what we're doing. So also, because so many of these developments have been happening in the last 12 to 24 months, is apps that actually allow us to measure what's going on in the field. Now you'll notice an acronym there, MRV. That counts for measurement, reporting, and verification. And all of these protocols require measurement, reporting, and verification. And verification is by a third party that says, hey, let's just make sure you're doing what you say you're doing. The measurement is what we're doing on site, and we are reporting it to the protocol, and then it's getting verified. So Elaine mentioned Wehan earlier. He and his group are responsible for the CHAR app, and that's the app that we're going to be using in the field to do these measurements, so that we can get all of the data together to send to the Climate Action Reserve, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so we have the ability to make biochar, we have this hypothesis, we have a protocol, and now we have an app that is going to allow us to do that measurement. And so last August, when the USDA Forest Service put out this notice of funding opportunity, and we read it, and we read the goal of it, right? Underserved and small acreage landowners, exactly who we've been talking about, participating in emerging private markets. Great, we have a new protocol for climate mitigation and forest resilience. These are all of the things that we wanted to accomplish. And so we saw this and we thought, you know what? This is a perfect fit. And our project goals are, to accomplish the goals of the grant, and really to see if this idea that we have of being able to pool all of these folks together and use that as a way to fund more resilience of these forests and reduce the severity of the fires coming through, this seemed like a great fit. Elaine, did you want to add anything before we move forward?
No, I think that covers it. I mean, the only other piece that sort of popped out at us as we were working our way through it is the scale of the technologies that we're using, this small ring of fire, and tends to be more suitable for the smallest of the smalls.
Yeah.
And that's something that some of the people that were supporting us and writing support letters, et cetera, pointed out is often the folks that fall through the cracks in some of the larger initiatives that we have on forest health in the state, because those initiatives are measured by acres treated, and it's a lot easier to treat one large acreage than a whole bunch of small ones. And, in a lot of cases, really small forest landowners don't even think of themselves as forest landowners. That's just a big backyard with trees in it. They're in the wildland urban interface. We think there's a lot of opportunity here to really start getting people excited about doing this kind of work and doing this kind of work themselves. I mean, obviously, we're going to do a lot of training here up front, and I think of it as this project as the starting to turn that engine and hopefully creating its own ongoing effort as people see their neighbors having success and how easy it is. And we hope that there's going to be a lot of kitchen conversations about this as we go through the process.
Absolutely. Thanks, Elaine. Okay, so some of the questions that we're trying to answer as part of this grant, and granted, there's some of these things we're starting to prove out, and we really just want to see if it scales out, right? Like a lot of the industrial biochar stuff is scaling up. We are trying to scale out. So first, can we get small forest landowners to participate, especially, as Elaine mentioned, people who don't think of themselves as small forest landowners? Can we get folks, forest and fire professionals to come and get trained up on this new practice? And then can we, through this grant, make a whole bunch of biochar? We certainly think so. And then with these new, digital MRV apps, can we get the right data? Is it complete? Is it high quality? And can we get it onto the registry and verified by a third party? We haven't done this before, and it's a new protocol. There's, less than 10 projects registered publicly on it so far. And then, assuming that's successful, will somebody want to buy the credits that we've produced from all of these small forest landowners in Washington? And at what price? Now, if we can make money on this, now the grant is very particular. The grant is not allowed to give any money directly to small forest landowners, and we'll go into this in a little bit more detail. We can fund these treatments, the outreach, all of these sorts of things, but no direct money goes to the forest landowners. So what's cool about this is that any revenue that we do get on this through the carbon credits, we get the opportunity to plow that right back into creating, an opportunity for more biochar to get produced for more small forest landowners. So we're really excited about that. And one of the questions is, okay, we are able to do this in the context of this grant, which is helping us get this going. But is this something that we can turn into a perpetual machine that can help fund more forest landowners, help fund more action? We don't know. We don't know. But this is a big part of what we're trying to find out. So we've talked about this a little bit, but let's go into who we are trying to support here. We mentioned we're focused on Washington State, and in particular, the central and north central area of Washington State. That's Kittitas, Chelan, and Okanagan counties. So that's who we're looking at for this project. Within the grant, the notice of funding was really clear about who qualifies. It has to be rural. And there's a tool that's available to help people determine if they are in what's classified as rural or not. Has 2,500 acres or less. And there's no minimum acreage for this. So again, as Elaine was saying, there's going to be folks who have land that has tree cover or is suitable for growing trees who might not necessarily think of themselves as small forest landowners. However, they really do need to do some fuels reduction. They're probably in the wildland urban interface for some of these smaller communities. And they're a perfect match for this project. And then the ownership is interesting. We're not talking about any public lands. This is all private groups, associations, corporations, tribes, or other legal entities. So homeowners associations, we can talk to you, or it doesn't necessarily have to be an individual. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear. The other thing that the grant wanted to do, remember it said small forest landowners and also underserved. We really do want to lean into underserved. And the way that the grant defines underserved is people who are new to forest land ownership. Now that means that you've only owned forest land for 10 years or less. If you're in a high poverty area, because of the geography that we're targeting, this is going to be a lot of our constituents, low revenue producers. This speaks to a little bit more, since it's through the USDA, this is a bit more of a farming term, but don't worry about that. Tribal members and veterans. So if you are in any of these categories, please talk to us, because we really want to make sure that at least 25%, I would love it to be more like at least half, fall into one of these underserved categories. Forest and fire professionals, come talk to us. We want to, provide training and opportunities to connect you with folks who have land that needs this work. So if you resemble any of these remarks here, please reach out to us. And communities and partners, what we alluded to earlier, we have had nothing but wonderful experiences connecting with conservation districts, the prescribed burn associations, a lot of folks in these types of organizations. And while we have relationships with some of these in some of the areas that we're working with, we're working on expanding our reach to more. So please, and if you don't see yourself listed here, still come talk to us. If you already have relationships with people who live in these at-risk areas, you're already a wonderful partner to be. So what I wanted to go through here is just to show how what we're looking to do with the grant interfaces with these three major constituent groups that we just talked about. So we just talked about small forest landowners, forest and fire professionals, and communities and partners. Now, there are already wonderful relationships between all of these entities. And what you're not seeing here is, yes, there are, of course, relationships that exist between small forest landowners and forest and fire practitioners. But to the point made earlier, a lot of the really small forest landowners, especially those who don't think of themselves as small forest landowners, may not already be working with a forestry professional, and they're probably certainly not working with a fire professional. So this is part of the reason why we want to connect with all of these groups. And the general sequencing within a particular community is that it starts off with some demonstrations. And we're working with the communities and partners. We're working with small forest landowners and forest and fire professionals to attend these demos, or for small forest landowners to bring a neighbor, or for a community to bring their community members, or for forest folks to bring their clients. We've seen at different workshops wonderful instances of somebody who's doing the land management and the person who owns the land both there together, and they're having these really robust side conversations about how they might take the next steps on implementation. So it's a great thing to do together. Also, one of the next things is making sure that as many of these forestry and fire professionals get the training they need to be able to do this work. It's slightly different than what they may be used to, and so getting hands on the kiln and playing with it is key, as well as getting the small forest landowners to sign up for the program. And the reason that's important is that everything in orange is the grant, right? So we're the ones who are going to be contracting with those forest and fire professionals to help do that work. Now, if you already have an existing relationship, great. We will also connect folks who might not be connected yet. So if we have a small forest landowner and they aren't already working with somebody, great. Let's connect them with a forestry and fire professional who's gone through the training and is ready to do it. Once that biochar production, while the biochar production and application is going on, we'll be, because we're contracting with those folks, we'll be paying the forestry and fire professionals for that work. And we'll be on site to do the measurement, reporting, and verification of that biochar production, and doing the work with sending it to the lab, basically everything that's needed to get it to the Climate Action Reserve. So as you can see, a lot of dots here, but everything in orange are the things that we are doing as part of the grant, as far as things that connect directly with these constituents. One of the things that you're not seeing here are some of the additional benefits to the communities, and that is less smoke, right? Less risk of escaped fires, because we're doing it in these really safe ways. So actually, I'm just going to go back. Elaine, is there anything you wanted to add to this slide? Oh, you're muted.
You can't get through one of these without somebody saying you're muted. So that was me. It was my turn. The only thing I'd say is that the landowners, when they sign up, the reason for that is that we need to go through this process of an attestation form, which sounds intimidating, but it's essentially says, hey, we're going to, create this biochar. This biochar we created is going to be put on site, and it's not going to be burned for charcoal and yada, yada, yada. So that when you go to try to market it, it's a real storage of carbon. It's not people get very inventive with these carbon credits, and there's a lot of angst out there in the world about, are credits real or is it just fluff? And so the effort here is to say, yes, these are real credits. We're going to measure the actual amount of carbon stored, and if somebody's willing to pay us for that, then that's trying to grease the wheel to keep this as a perpetual machine. But the landowner is going to sign up and say, yeah, I want this work done. This is where it's going to go on my land, and I'm not going to pick it up and move it somewhere else.
Thanks, Elaine.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so this bubble right here, right? This is the one where we are, part of our hypothesis is that if we can generate additional revenue through the Climate Action Reserve's protocol, what this does is increase the size of the money that we can again put back into this process and get more biochar production and application done, and employ, not that we're the employer, but that that more people get more work in these rural and remote areas to do this work. Okay, so this grant is over a 3-year period, and this is broad brush what we're looking at here. And you'll notice that instead of Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, we're using winter, spring, summer, and fall. And that's because this work is inherently seasonal. And especially in the areas that we're working, in the winter, there's several feet of snow. You're not getting in there. And in the summer, there's a burn ban. So you're not burning anything. So the work we're going to be doing is primarily going to be from a biochar production perspective in the fall and in the spring. Right now, we're in this early period right now. This webinar is part of this this step here. And we are already starting to do outreach and planning for round 1. Now, we have 3 rounds scheduled right now, and what that's going to do is allow us to learn from round 1 and make hopefully round 2 even better, learn in round 2, and hopefully make round 3 even better. Our goal is also to go through the end-to-end process with the Climate Action Reserve early next year based on the data from round 1. And to see how successful we are in going through that process end to end. If we're able to generate that revenue, that's going to allow us to do this bonus round 4. Again, I was not joking when I said we are literally trying to take any revenue we get and pour it back into these communities. And if we're successful with that, wonderful. And then we will be putting in our report at the end. One of the things that's not really explicit here is that we really want to share information out about what's working. We want this to become a practice that is done in many, many places. And if this is truly replicable, well, let's replicate it. So there's the reporting back in the context of the grant, but there's also the sharing out of these practices to industries, communities, etc. Elaine, anything you wanted to add to this?
No, I think you covered it.
Great. So how to participate? I'm going to be putting up a QR code in a moment. There's also a link that we've pinned in the chat. For landowners and forest and fire professionals, there's ways to register your interest on that page. And basically, if you're a landowner, if you have if you have a need to do any fuels reduction, we would love to talk to you, especially if you already have slash piles that you've been looking at going, gosh, I really need to deal with those, but I'm a little bit scared about lighting them up. Well, come talk to us. We're here to help exactly this issue, because abandoned slash piles are just just waiting to turn into a wildfire. If you're planning a project, if you're going to be doing some fuels reduction work, come talk to us, because there are things that you can do with your forester to help prep the site, to make sure that when you've done your fuels reduction work, everything is set up so that doing the biochar production later is way easier. For forestry and fire professionals, we come talk to us so we can train you on this new practice. And especially if you already work with landowners and offer other types of services like thinning, limbing, fuels reduction work, this is yet another service line that you can add to your offering. And then, of course, communities, organizations, potential partner organizations, please come talk to us about potentially hosting a demo. We're doing a workshop tomorrow in Plain, Washington, north of Leavenworth, and that's with a youth center. We've done ones at community centers. We've done them on private forest landowners' property. We're going to be doing one in Wenatchee in May at a garden. So there's many different types of organizations that are wonderful hosts for this sort of thing. And this is a great way to help serve your community. And so with that, here is, again, a QR code for the website. The address is pinned. And I think now is the time we look to see what have we got for questions so far. Hannah, you should be able to unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you so much.
Great. I run a small forest services business out of the Olympic Peninsula, but we like to get over to the east side sometimes, and we do a lot of fuels reduction and thinning, etc. Is the best way for operators to stay in touch with you all filling out the form on your website, or is there somebody in particular we should be in touch with?
Great question, Hannah. Thank you for that. Yeah, fill out that form. And we already have some folks who have filled it out already, which is great. And what that'll let us do is add you to our mailing list. As events come up, we're going to make sure to add them to the list of events, and then we will be starting to get on a cadence of letting people know that events are coming up. And there are also, there are going to be some events that happen that are not necessarily on the east side. So for example, at the end of the month, we're going to be presenting to the Washington Farm Forestry Associations. We're going to be doing a presentation at their annual meeting and also doing a demo. So if you're a member of the Washington Farm Forestry Association, that's another option, and that's going to be closer to Vancouver, Washington. So that's the best way. Short version, yes, please fill out the form. We would love, that's a great way for us to be able to communicate directly to you about stuff that is specific to the forest and fire professionals.
Awesome. And one other question, which it might be more complicated than you have time right now, but what's like the maximum acreage that is reasonable to treat using a ring of fire kiln?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. That's probably a more detailed question for today. There's a difference between how much you can treat and how much we'll be able to pay for through the grant on a particular property. So we are trying to make sure that we are able to spread the love. And so that means that we don't blow it all on one property, that we're going to do it a bit at a time. Certainly our hope is that, folks like yourselves and the landowner will go, this is great, and use the part that we were able to pay for as something that snowballs into you doing it in more places. Additionally, on a given property for a given project, there's usually more than one method that you're going to want to use. This isn't a silver bullet that does everything.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. And it looks like we have Edie.
Yes, sorry. Thank
Wonderful.
you. Thank you. Thanks for this great presentation. I had a question from the landowner and timing perspective. Got property in Okanagan County, so I think would be a good fit. But if you do not have the slash piles yet, but have lots of thinning that needs to be done, what is the timing? Where do you guys come in? Do you want the thinning to have already occurred? And is there a timing scenario in terms of like, should it not be freshly cut? Should you wait? What's sort of what do you want? How do you want the landowner to prepare for the
Great question, Edie. Yeah. Generally speaking, what's optimal in a situation like what you've just described is that you let us know what's happening with the thinning that you're already planning to do so that we can collaborate with the folks who are doing that work, hopefully get them trained up on this practice so that as they're doing it and as they're aggregating the stuff from the thinning, that it is set up in a way that it makes the biochar production and application, frankly, that much easier and that much more seamless. Because depending on where you're siting it or bringing it together, making sure that it's closer to the flat area, those sorts of things are going to be really, really helpful. Now, from a timing perspective, it's always better to start these off with pretty dry fuels. So, less than 30%. We have a little moisture meter that we use on the fuels, and that usually means letting it dry out a bit. Now, in Okanagan, Chelan, and Kittitas, as you are very aware, it's incredibly dry and things dry out very, very quickly. So it really depends on what the moisture levels are where you are. Also, it doesn't mean that all of the fuels need to be at that lower moisture level. We just need the lower moisture level to get it started, and then fresher and fresher fuels can get added because it gets well over 600 degrees Celsius, right? Like over 1400 degrees Fahrenheit in there. So you'll see some steam when you put in the fresher stuff for a little bit, and then it'll start getting processed as well.
We did have some conversation with, folks that are early adopters on this around the question of one and done, because the contractors don't want to keep coming back and doing this over and over again, right? They're used to doing things like, well, we're going to cut it down and we're going to run it through the chipper, or we're going to masticate, one and done, I'm out of here. Because there's additional cost to doing this other kind of treatment. And I think that's something we're going to learn in terms of the timing of these processes. We're pretty certain, from prior experience further south, they've used them a lot in California and Southern Oregon, that you can handle the wetter materials. So this one and done is possible. But it might take a little bit of skill. And, that also means that we need people that have had a little bit of experience first on figuring this out. I thought it would be very simple, like starting a burn pile, which I've done plenty of. And then I start talking to the professionals who are doing it. I'm like, there's a little bit of nuance to this. And that they're going to learn, and we're going to learn in terms of the measuring, but that the practitioners are going to learn. So they're going to be able to bring that skill set to the next person that they work with and the next person. I would say in your case, because you haven't yet done the thinning, you're obviously probably not going to be in the fall unless you're going to do it this summer. Or you think about, this is in round 2, or maybe a really good setup for round 3 to do this kind of work. And I think the other pitch that's really important to think about we've been talking to people that have done fire risk reduction in Eastern Washington for 25 or 30 years. And they're like, oh yeah, we did that chipping 25 years ago. We dumped it in this place here and it's still there. Doesn't decay. So that means that the risk is still there. We're just changing the profile of the risk by doing these kinds of treatments. And what producing the biochar does is similar to doing an underburn, but a little bit safer and much less risk. Depends on people's risk tolerance. That doing it this way, we're actually converting that biochar. We're taking away the fire risk from that material and hopefully improving the site. I mean, I'm really excited about the idea of increasing moisture holding capacity on these soils when we're putting it back on site. I think that's a big deal, especially in really dry areas.
Absolutely. Well, I think we're at 2 minutes too. So we've got, there's one more raised hand and yeah, Matt, do you want to, Matt or Dale, whoever can get their mic off first.
I think my mic's off.
There you
This is
go.
Matt.
You're
Yeah.
on.
Thank you both so much for putting on the webinar. I just wanted to share my excitement and enthusiasm for what you're doing. Just a little bit of feedback. I have a background in finance. I started getting very excited about carbon credits. I participate as a member of the Climate Commitment Act Environmental Justice Offsets Working Group. So certified arborist, then I have I've been toying around with biochar, burning a Tin Man kind of unit. And we've had USDA out to the property. So what I'm seeing is all these bits and pieces that I've been interested in, and to see it come to fruition through what you're doing is very encouraging. So thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate you. We are 1 minute left. Dale, if you're able to come off mute, let's see if we can squeeze you in.
Can you hear me?
Hi, Dale.
Hi. I appreciate the new tool that you two have introduced in the toolbox of fuels management. I've been an advocate for prescribed fire for 21 plus years. And I'd like to reiterate the benefits of prescribed fire. The fire byproducts of which you're addressing are, you're addressing the charcoal fire byproduct. Also, ash is an important component that returns nutrients to the soil. Heat is a component that increases the resilience or the regrowth of deciduous vegetation and broadleaf plants. It also reduces the evergreen plants. Smoke has a chemical in it that increases the germination rate and I guess health of young plants. And then we have fire effects, soil impacts, and something I might point out is mineral soils are needed for certain seeds to germinate. Also, native bees need their soils for nesting. And broadcast burning will reduce parasites and diseases such as ticks and root disease. And as I mentioned, regrowth of deciduous and broadleaf vegetation. And then seed bank impact, where it's susceptible to activating germination. An example of that is evergreen ceanothus vallutinus, as well as destroying seeds that are in the soil seed bank that are susceptible to the heat of the fire. So again, thank you for putting all this together and the opportunity to share my thoughts. And I'm definitely interested in attending a demonstration if it works out. So thank you.
Thanks, Dale.
Thank you so much. Well, with that, everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. This will be posting this recording probably earlier next week. And please visit the website and get on the mailing list, and we will look forward to seeing you at an event soon. Take care, everyone.